Howdy ho guys, Bo Jinjin here again, and in this century I want to talk to you guys. I want to continue along the lines of what I talked about in my previous entries about trusting yourself, right? And in this entry I want to talk to you guys about success, right? Because I've ultimately been saying in my previous entries that you have to trust yourself that you will be successful. You have to trust yourself that the ideas that you have are of value, and that you have the capabilities of being someone who can, not necessarily change the world, but like change your own life, to be able to choose a life that you actually want and, kind of wrestle yourself out of that fear-based thinking that holds us all, down. In lives of mediocrity and depression and stuff like that, right? So, how do we predict success, right? How do we predict success? How do you predict whether or not someone will be successful or a failure? How do you pick out the Mark Zuckerbergs or the Steve Jobs or the Bill Gates? These are all technological, but the Kobe Bryants. How do you pick out the people, or the Corey Henrys? Look him up. How do you pick out these people? From people who are destined to fail. Given the same kind of level of effort, overall, right? And obviously the answer is you can't, right? You can't predict whether or not someone will be a success or not, based purely on external factors, right? It's like, how do you know that Mark Zuckerberg is a success, right? It's because he already is a success, right? If this was before Facebook and you heard the name Mark Zuckerberg, he's an up and coming programmer, whiz from like Harvard, and he's going to, someone from the future time travels back in time and tells you that, hey, there's this guy called Mark Zuckerberg and he's going to invent like next big thing that's going to revolutionize the way that we communicate with each other and stay in touch with each other, right? It's literally going to revolutionize the way we communicate with each other. Like if you were basing your judgments purely from an external point of view, you'd be like, nah, no way, right? It's because it's logically like you can't predict that, right? You can't be sure whether or not this prediction will actually come true, right? So, if you can't predict whether or not someone will be successful based on purely external factors, then it makes sense to not put, too much emphasis on the external factor, right? Not to put too much emphasis on what other people predict is going to be the outcome for you. Obviously, there is some merit to, the predictions that we make about, each other, right? Because, if someone has been sitting on their ass for like 20 years of their life, or like has been on a set path for 20 years of their life, or whatever, whatever length of time, then, it makes sense to predict that they're not going to really get anywhere. But, having said that, you can't predict whether or not that person will then suddenly come to some kind of enlightenment about himself, about the world, and then, from 5 years from then or 10 years from then, get to a point where they are ultimately successful, right? So obviously most people who you predict are going to be failures just because of the law of entropy, right? It's just like the road to success is difficult, right? Like I said in the first entry I made about trusting yourself, right? It's not easy, right? If it were easy, there'd be more of, there were more successful people in the world, right? But that's not the case. It's not easy, right? It's just people just default to having a shitty life because that's just the way that our reality works, right? The law of entropy. So what do we do, right? If if we can't look to external, well, what I'm ultimately saying to you is that how to know whether or not you'll be successful, you trust in your intuition, right? When you get onto this path, this path that I advocate, waking up, to your own voice, tapping into your sensitivity, starting to think on your own terms and to defer your kind of the basis of your thinking to yourself ultimately. When you start to do this, you'll start to hear the voice, welling up within you, telling you that, that life is about possibilities, that, potentially you could be successful. It's not too far-fetched to imagine yourself being someone who could potentially be successful, or even just pursuing something that you enjoy in life, or, having a life that you ultimately want, right? It's not too far-fetched once you start to hear that voice within you, right? And so, ultimately, for those when you start to hear that voice, you start to have something that most people don't have, which is faith, right? That voice within you is your faith, right? It is your voice of faith. It is the voice that tells you, despite everything else, that, actually, you could be successful. Actually, your path of passion is a viability, if you just keep believing in it, right? You start to see how it could happen, right? You start to see, okay, I have these ideas, and it takes a bit of building, but once you've built it to a certain extent, you start to hear yourself, you start to feel that confidence in yourself, knowing before the fact that, it is eventually going to be a fact, right? And that is something that you can't really prove to anyone, right? Again, this is faith. This isn't scientific knowledge, right? This isn't observable knowledge. This isn't objectively provable, facts or phenomena. This is faith, right? This is just something that you can tell, that your intuition tells you that, this is going to work out, right? And this is really the ultimate thing that separates, successful people from people who aren't successful, really. It's as simple as that, but it obviously, from an observable point of view, it's really, you can't tell, right? But the successful people are the ones who are able to visualize themselves. They have that voice within them that tells them that, it's not happened yet, but I know that if I keep going on this path, then eventually I'm going to be a success, or I'm going to, what I'm envisioning right now is going to be a reality if I keep going on this, right? And, if you're looking in from an external point of view, from people who don't have this kind of faith in themselves or other people, then these people just look like idiots to you. They'll look like gullible, self-aggrandizing, just kind of self-delusional people, right? And it's not going to make sense to you. And this is where the subconscious tearing down happens, because you think that these people are delusional, because you don't trust in yourself, and so you kind of subconsciously tear them down. And you don't mean to do it. It's just that it makes sense to you, right? Because this person has been a certain way for their whole life, and you haven't seen, it's not as though you can see anything tangibly, telling you that they're going to be a success, right? They just talk a big talk, right? Seemingly. And so you logically predict that they're not going to succeed, right? But this is where my invitation comes in, which is ultimately to develop that trust in yourself, ultimately, because that's where it usually begins, right? The point at which you start to trust other people is the point after which you've started to trust yourself, right? So, so really, yeah, when someone starts to know that they're going to succeed, it's pretty much guaranteed to happen. If they really trust themselves, and obviously, you can't tell. That's the whole point, right? You can't tell if this person is for real or not. There's no way of telling unless that person is you, right? You're the only person who knows, for a fact, whether or not you will succeed, right? You're the only one in control of that as well. So you can't necessarily know whether or not someone is going to succeed based on what they tell you or anything else, because you're not them, right? You just can't tell. But I'm saying to you that perhaps, more of these people would succeed if only you were to put your faith into them, or if only you were to, start to be more positive and give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe, like I say, focusing on the vibe of possibility, of positivity. Maybe it can be done, right? You start to do that, and maybe we'll start seeing more successful people in the world. Maybe we'll start seeing more positive change in the world. Maybe we'll start to see a better world, people happier because they achieve things. People, not even that they necessarily have the life that they want, but they know that it's a possibility. Because, the main reason why so many of us shy away from our dreams, shy away from our passion, or anything to do with any kind of selfish or grandiose thought of how your life can be better than everyone else's. That is all kind of not possible. You start to people start to believe that it's possible, and even that is such a freeing state of mind and body that and spirit that our world will be so much more different. The people the relationships you have with other people are going to be so different. The energy that you feel in society is going to be so much more different if we start to focus more on this positive vibe of possibility, of it can be done, right? Of trust in your intuition that you can be someone of value, and that you can construct a life of value, right? So cool. Success, my friends, is not predictable. It is something that you have to place your faith in, right? So cool. That was my message for this entry. Hope it was helpful as always, and see you in the next one. Peace.